And off we go. I think I'll probably mute you. Mute all.
My phone.
There we go. And I'll put this thing on.
Yes.
And then share my screen. There we go. Now, we've been talking about China. Let me just close the window. There's a bit of noise from outside. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about China in Latin America. Now, I was just watching a little program, which in fact talked about why it is that we get so much negativity about China. And this is from an American guy who has lived in China for a good 10 years. And he's saying that the mainstream media in the West is very anti-China. And he doesn't really sort of see why it should be, because when you look at it from the Chinese perspective, they're not sort of anti what I would say the global sort of involvement on the trade side or on political level or whatever level. And yet we have this big negativity that is sort of put out by the press. And of course, I've told you before, one of the reasons why I give my sort of talks on China is because of all the good things that China is doing, and to try and sort of neutralize some of the negativity that is there. Because what seems to be happening is that the question of Uyghurs and Hong Kong keeps coming up, and if not human rights. And if you ask the question ourselves, and I say, look, let's for a moment just stop and think, what is happening about human rights in USA? A country for 300 years who has the democracy and all that, which gave the black people, votes only not too long ago, and of course are in and the native Indians in a pretty bad state. So human rights, I think, is just a slogan that gets sort of touted when you want to sort of try and demonize the other. Okay, there may be some little sort of difficulties in other countries, but if you can't look at as the scripture says, the mote in your eye, you're not going to be able to sort of present an objective view of your country, or for that matter, the world. So I find it quite amusing that every day there is some negative report coming out on China. And it is astonishing to me that when a country like China has, in fact, done so much to uplift itself, 7 to 800 million people, I keep repeating that, and brought them above the poverty line, and then advancing on all fronts, on technology, on essentially trade, on manufacturing, whatever it may be, it is making a lot of headway. And of course, we've talked about Belt and Road. I'll talk about it a bit more today, because that has been extended to Latin America as well now. Now, as opposed to the Chinese narrative of this global BRI, which is a humongously big infrastructure project, which invites all the countries of the world to join in, actually. But the only countries that have not joined in is most of the Europe and USA and Canada, I think. But the rest of the countries have joined in, and you'll see to what extent that the people are coming into the ambit of China. So let's look at and see what is happening now on that front, and let's look at it and say the agenda for today is the BRI. Now, this humongously big narrative, it's the first time I've seen anything of this nature that has come through as a global project, which has made so much difference and involved so much territory and so many people of the world. The Belt and Road Initiative, of course, it has this romantic background of the Silk Road of the old. And we can take from that a little bit of solace that it did good to both the Europe and to China as well, exchanging ideas and goods and so on. So, in a modern sense, now the same idea has been extended to include, infrastructure, generally speaking. And when I say infrastructure, we're talking about the rail, the road, and the ports, and the power station, the energy, whatever it takes for modern society to be able to deliver for its people. So we have that sort of idea being proposed only in the last 10 years or even less since Xi Jinping came about. He brought in, if you like, a unified approach. It gave, in fact, the narrative to the whole world to put together all the various types of help that was, or rather trade and investment that was being done by the world into China and from China to elsewhere. But to give it some sort of identity was Xi Jinping's notion of calling it the Belt and Road Initiative, based on the old Silk Road. Now that idea is being extended to Latin America. Now I'll tell you how much of this part here is going to be actually under the influence of China, and what are in fact, the fears that one can be sort of realizing uh, on the downside things. So we'll consider that as well, and to see what it is that is the downside to this big sort of good win-win strategy of China. And of course, the counter narrative is it's a death trap, as what USA keeps on saying, or generally the West keeps on pointing out. And I can say, of course, there are cases of debt being too excessive in certain countries who haven't managed it well. But on the whole, it has done a world of good to all these countries. So the countries in South America who are going the Chinese way are, of course, all these big countries. They're not the China, the Argentina and Brazil, although the largest countries in USA, in South America, they haven't signed up to the BRI as yet, but they are partaking of all the other activities that they have to engage China. Okay, we'll talk about the risks and, of course, the US game plan in order to project their own sort of thinking as to what this narrative of China means to the world. And I'm sort of disappointed because there is no matching counter narrative which is exciting. Instead, we are talking about basically how bad the Chinese program and their narrative is, which seems to me rather sort of saying that we don't have anything to offer. And that's what it means. Okay, let's get on with this. Now, competing for the influence. Now, China in Latin America, because we already know how influential it has become in most of the Asian countries, and we'll see a little bit more of that as we go along. But today we'll focus a little bit more on the Latin America regarding the BRI. Now, as you know, this is the thing that I've kept on presenting to you, this narrative of BRI. You can see from just the lines that are there all over here how extensive it is. It's humongous. These lines are called the corridors, and the ones that we've talked about are the ones that linking Pakistan here to Western China. And of course, it was going to open up Africa for Central Asia as well. So it's a humongously important. And then you can see this, all these territories down here being connected as well. And then, of course, the routes are then coming into Europe as well. And look at this light blue thing here, this is the water sort of course, which is also the equivalent of the roads on inland, but on the waterways. So humongously big project, and a little bit more about that as we go along. Okay, just to give some little dimension to it, launched in 2013, when Xi Jinping came into power, and it encompasses 136 countries and 30 international organizations have signed to the BRI cooperation documents. Now that is a humongous thing. It's the size of the UN, as it were, but on the economic side. Of course, not all countries have signed up because a lot of people feel that China is usurping their traditional role of calling the shots in the world. So here it's a multi-million trillion, in fact, dollar infrastructure. Uh, this is some of the figures that have been mentioned, about $4 to $8 trillion. And of course, we have these type of things that are mentioned here. In the last 5 years, focused two specific routes: overland Silk Route and the economic belt, the land and the sea routes, basically. Okay, so here we are. Now, what is actually going in and coming out? If you look at this map here, I pulled that out simply to show that the links here show you the type of commodity that is coming into China. Like the black one here is going from various parts of Africa into China. And of course, now Iran is well now going that way, but this is just showing us the picture of Africa and South America. And then cotton here from Africa here. Base metals, that's all the cobalts and the iron and all the other sort of ores that are needed. And of course, South America is very rich in that, and therefore can be a big supplier and is a big supplier now. So China, what it does is, because of the type of government it has and its long-term sort of thinking, and they're not the 4 5 hour sort of rule of a party that the democracy in various parts of the world has. It's going beyond the 10-year, now in the shape of Xi Jinping. But every 10 years, they have a change of leader. It happens now at the lower levels, but not at the Xi Jinping level, because he's now president for life. So you can see it's bringing in a lot of raw materials into the country. And then, of course, the manufactured goods go back. But then that is not such a, you know, black and white picture in that. There is exchange of manufactured goods also being exchanged by both the countries depending on the capacity that they have. Okay, what are they sort of actually from Latin America? Now, if you look at Venezuela, this is saying primary products as a percentage of countries' total exports to China. So practically 100% of what they produce is going to China from Venezuela, which means crude oil, refined and bitumen, iron ore, iron products, and leather and hides. So you can see the immense. And in this one here, you can see the Latin American trade growth with China is outstripping with the rest of the world. So Latin America exporting that much, and to Latin America global only this much. So you can see the red lines are the ones that are indicating that the exports are to China. There's a lot of information in here, but just taking in visually, we can see a lot of the products that these countries from Colombia to Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Argentina as well, Brazil, they're, they're, they're sending to China. Because China, has a huge appetite because it's manufacturing a lot and it supplies to the world what it produces. So you can see Latin America has become a very, very important part of the Chinese overall program. And they're bringing in this type of imports and exports into South America or Latin America through this BRI. They've extended the BRI from Asia and Africa to Latin America. So it's a good sort of extension. Now, this is just telling us a little bit about the timeline. See, the whole thing started at 2013 when Xi Jinping launches the One Belt and One Road initiative. And by the time we are here today, this is only up till 2019. But what we have is a lot of countries joining in, and, and we've seen that and we've talked about many times. But there are downsides to it as well. And we can look at it a little bit more detail later on. The concerns are over the debt burden that the small or weak economies that if they borrow a lot for the sake of infrastructure, then they're going to be in a debt trap. Now, this is all dependent on how well each country manages this, the loans that they get. If you look at the current method of the World Bank and IMF, they also give loans to countries, and if the loans are not payable, then they reschedule them, and then of course demand certain, um, if you like, measures be introduced in the country to make it more viable for money to be returned. So like tax collection and things like that, for instance, and investing in people's training and the economy. So the debt is really also, it was there before, but China has now made it into something which says, okay, we want to go in for what he calls a win-win situation, not a win-lose type of thing. So win-win situation means that the country borrowing must also make money out of that investment, and China also must profit from it. So that's the type of intention. But a couple of countries have got into trouble, but like Sri Lanka, I think was in trouble because when the port was built, and I talked about it some weeks ago, they couldn't get the traffic to the port, and therefore it was not a financially viable thing. And what China did was to sort of take over the management of that for the next 40 years or whatever. So you can see the conditions that are put in when borrowing is adopted. Uh, you need to sort of pay it back. If you don't pay it back, there are sort of penalties of a sort. And in this case, the penalty was that the management will transfer to the Chinese and they will run the port. So it sort of suits the Chinese that they don't lose the money. They will still have some influence in the area because of the port. So you can see that. So some fear that China is aimed to control every link to supply chains and is growing its portfolio of key sectors such as energy. So also, the supply chains are worldwide, as we know. And if China is into all these countries, having a fair amount of investment and footprint, then what happens is you can have some little risk that if the economies don't do well, that the supply chains then get affected. So there is that sort of risk as well. Focus on projects and sectors that carry big risk. So now the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, as you know, deals with humongously big projects. Now, one of the things about China we've seen in their domestic sort of situation, they have acquired immense amount of skills in building, whether it be railways or the construction of one sort, or bridges, or the energy sort of uh, stations. So they have acquired a tremendous amount of know-how. And this know-how, they are saying, we can bring that know-how to your country and build the infrastructure for you. Now, what they also do in the process, as we see a little bit later on, is that they bring their own experts and they try and bring in the expertise that is necessary, and they have uh, great success in that. Because what happens normally is that if you've seen the model that we have been following since the World War II, when loans have been given by World Bank and IMF and so on, that money has really gone into the pockets of politicians. A lot of money has been wasted. And what Chinese model is doing is that some of the money that they give for loans are towards the skills that they bring in, which they pay for, and also if the country can't pay it back in terms of dollars because of the trade imbalances and the weak economies, then they can pay the Chinese back into with raw materials that they have in the country. So it's not uh, a type of game which is just uh, take coming into a country and taking away their wealth, as used to happen in the colonial times. Now it's a sort of a fair exchange. What the Chinese say is that we'll bring in the expertise, we'll develop your infrastructure, but in return, if you can't pay us in dollars, pay us in the resources that you have, like oil or iron or whatever. Now, this is the extent to which the BRI has expanded. You can look, it's a humongously big area. Um, Most of Asia, and China, if you include that, they don't include that for some reason as a blue, but it is part of that whole scheme. The Mercosur is the trade agreement between South American countries over here. And these two countries are becoming part of this BRI before long. And we'll see some of the projects that China has undertaken there. Okay, if you look at percentage wise as to how many at the global level, it's interesting because what we have here is, if I can read it out, BRI spans about 140 countries, including China. And two-thirds of the world's population, in fact, is covered by these countries. It's a humongously big project. This amounts to 61.5% of the Caribbean, 67% of South America, 42% of Central America, 100% of the Middle East down here, 97% of Asia. So we have, I think, amazing amount of coverage by this grand narrative, which I think we should all be thankful that the China at least has the vision to be able to offer the world, other than just having sort of bases come and be installed nearby so as to keep law and order about and keep your dictators in place simply because they say we are your friends, and that's it. Now this is the type of situation we can see in Latin America. Now here is the little legend. The brown thing tells us that these are people already availing what is called the AIIB facilities. That's the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. You could say it's like a World Bank, but focused by set up by the Chinese and by the member countries to fund the infrastructure projects. So that is where the expertise lies. Then there are these other countries here, the blue ones. These are BRI affiliates. They're not full members. The different classes of membership is to do with how much influence they can exercise in the organization. So you have these types of AIB prospect member. So here, these Chile and Bolivia, and the green, they are neither. So what we have is South America basically is turning very much towards China. See? This is the current investment. Now Venezuela has got the 67 billion. Venezuela, because of all the shenanigans that are going on, because it is such an oil-rich country, that USA couldn't leave it alone. Therefore, they put a lot of effort into trying to see whether they could get rid of Chavez, who was the original guy who called the shots there in Venezuela, and now Maduro. Uh, but they're still around because China has supported Venezuela. Although they are broke practically, the only thing that is going for them is the amount of oil that they pump out. And the Chinese are making sure that they have the ability at least to pump out enough oil so as to sort of, carry on as a country and make payments to China as well that are due. Now, this is all the other countries here, to the extent that you can see. It's a pretty major type of involvement with China. Now, this is an interesting thing. If you look at the year 2000, and if you look at the blue in the map here, that is the biggest supplier of these countries in blue was USA, right? And the one in the red are China. See, China was just supplying people like here, Mongolia and Tehran there because it was under sanctions, Libya here, Congo there. So just a few countries. Uh, and of course, the blue was prevailing. This is just going back 20 years. And now we can see in the year 2019 or 20, the world has become red. The biggest supplier is China. So you can see in 20 years, what China has done is to push USA out from practically every country, not by way of guns, but by way of the economy and the trade and the projects that they have brought into those countries. So that's why they say it's a win-win for all of them. And all these countries wouldn't go the Chinese way if there wasn't something for them. Because China isn't coming in with any gunboat type of diplomacy. It's just coming in with saying, look, we are going to sort of build a bridge for you or a road for you. And we'll build it because we've got the expertise and we can do it, a very good job. So this is why they have become so influential. And yet what we see in the Western press is not a pipsqueak about that. What we hear all the time is about the Uyghurs and about the Hong Kong. I mean, it's such a disgrace that you have a free press here, but yet is mum to report on things that need to be reported on, which are worldwide and important. Okay, it's turned into Latin America has turned into an unexpected battlefield now for both USA, because USA now, South America is the backyard of USA. So if China, after taking over practically of Africa and Asia and getting into Europe and now into South America as well, USA is sort of getting terrified and saying, what the hell is happening here? And the answer is very clear. I mean, the most clear example was the example of Trump having come and ruined the sort of global perspective and got himself out of all these multilateral organizations to go it alone. And that hasn't fared well because then that has opened up the space more for China now to come even to its backyard, which is what's happening now. Okay, just a few things. Script here. The Belt and Road Initiative has a very unique perspective. In the last few years, more than 20, I'll just move that a bit. Okay, I'll put it there. 25 billion US dollars has come from China into Latin America, helping the infrastructure projects, helping large investments. You have the digital Silk Road with companies and Huawei. You see, Huawei and all that were sort of kept out of the Western economies because they said that, oh, they steal the data. But that's just a political game being played because, all other IT companies do the same. So here it is. So they have come in with to developing 5G into those countries. And what we have is not just the economy, but for example, education. So they're into it. They're trying to develop the AI as well, because China is very advanced in AI technology, and with the fast network like 5G, it is much more advanced than the West in terms of e-commerce and in terms of utilizing the new technologies. And this now, China is transplanting a lot of that into Latin America now. Now, this is just telling you about some of the trade figures. Okay, if you look at it globally, the trade figures say that there is a negative trade balance as far as South America is concerned, because China is bringing in China is getting a lot of stuff from South America, and the trade imbalance is in China's favor. So these are just indications of that trend there. What are the types of things that are being sort of sent to China and which are exported? Well, primary means basically like food, soya beans, or what have you, or iron ore. Then you've got the resource base, which means some processing has been done, and that's also been exported. So you can see still manufacturing is very low. So very little manufactured stuff is leaving Latin America to go into China. So this is another way of looking at it. This is exports of uh, to China from Latin America. Most of it is going to China here. This is China. This 55% is primary again, which is all the basics like food and iron ore, without process. And then this is the processed one. So you can see the amount is about $500 million there. And for the rest of the world, this is the ROW, rest of the world. In the same proportion, you can see what sort of exports are being done to the rest of the world by Latin America. And that's to the tune of about 5 billion there, or trillion, or billion, I'm not sure that. But the fact is that it's about 10 times as much to the rest of the world, but 10% of that is going to China. What are the things that are, when the investment comes in from China, where is it going? You can see this, the latest figures are this 5 billion to infrastructure, this uh, red line. Then extraction and processing is this brown one. And manufacturing is the other one, color, this greenish. Finance in blue. So you can see the amount of money that China is bringing in is going into these types of areas. Infrastructure, for mining, manufacturing. So in fact, it is helping the local countries in these areas, which otherwise they wouldn't have had because they don't have a very good access to finance. And China coming in is a boon for them. Now, Brazil is not a member at the moment, but I think it'll become a member soon. Now, you can see the amount of exports from Brazil to China is already, in over 50%. So you can see that in terms of ties, already Brazil is already got one foot in China in terms of the BRI thing. Now, this is basically saying that all these countries are growing exponentially in relation to Chinese sort of involvement. Excuse me for 1 second, I'll just open the window. I had to close that because the children downstairs are making a bit of noise. So here we are. Now, this is a guy who was a professor, and he's saying the trade between China and Latin America is very complementary, which means that no one country is, really benefiting out of the other, but they're both equally sort of benefiting. So it's not a question of the old rapacious policy of stealing your resources. Now, here we are saying basically that how could you evaluate the current relation between China and Latin America? This is a professor saying China and Latin America is very positive. China is the biggest trade partner of the region, is the first biggest foreign direct investment investor in the region. So you can see that when we talk about foreign direct investment, it means it's not a loan. It means that some companies from China are coming in and investing it in order to sort of develop the businesses locally. For instance, if they want to sort of make use of the iron ore, they can set up a factory, make some stuff over there, and ship it to China or to the rest of the world. So it's that type of investment doesn't mean that you take on a debt. So that's a good type of investment to come in to China, into Latin America. Uh, and one of the main loan countries for Latin America, so China is the one. So what we have here is the participation of China in the region has grown exponentially and is still growing because I think it's a win-win participation. Yeah, we've seen that. How has this relation been transformed over the past 7 decades? Okay, what he's saying is that China has had not just relations since 2013, but has been already uh, for the past 70 years. So here are the things. So they've had, in fact, for the past 70 years, some little contact, not too much. Like the economic trade and cultural relation between China and Latin America started in the 1600s. It was the first time that China and Latin America countries established a trade route, the old sort of Silk Route. Since 1970, we have the opening up of China. So it's basically historically, probably not a great deal of involvement, but still they knew that Latin American was there and Latin America knew China was there. So after this relation has progressively increased, so what we're saying is since 2001, when China entered WTO, relationship has jumped, and you're talking about the 70s and 80s, the percentage of the participation of China in the trade Latin America was only 2% and 2.4, and has increased nowadays to 20%. So a tenfold increase has taken place in the last 30, 40 years. Right, now how are we doing for time? Okay, I've said this about 20 minutes. I'll quickly go over this and then we'll simply look at and see whether we can, I'll skip over to, yeah, I think this is something, uh, I'll show you very quickly some of the pictures to give you some little pictorial thing about Panama is very much into the Belt and Road thing of China. All these projects are being done in Argentina and Brazil and in all the other countries that I've mentioned over here. So it's quite an extensive involvement. Now in Argentina, see, you've got this rail network. And Chinese are very good at building rail networks. So they said, look, we'll build you a rail network and all your stuff can be then shipped across to the port so that it can be exported. So one of the things about this I thought might so mention is very important railway that crosses the agricultural heartland of Argentina. As it is Argentina's interest to modernize its railway, the railway transports material that are essential for China, like soya, wheat, corn flour, and so on. That's the primary things or basic stuff. And what these loans, to some extent, have also highlighted here is that the loans that Chinese give, they require the use of Chinese companies and of Chinese equipment because they're bringing in the expertise, so they bring in the type of equipment that they need to build the infrastructure. Argentina happens to produce a lot of things that would be required to build a railway, but the loan conditions were such that they required the importation of Chinese equipment fully across the board, which was detrimental, I think, to local industry. So to some extent, the local industry does sort of suffer because if you don't buy stuff from the local sort of companies, then you don't. But then, of course, China is saying, okay, we are bringing in the investment. and the expertise, we'd like to bring our own equipment as well. Yeah, this is the railway being built here, the carriages, and the Chinese are very good at building, and they build it very fast. This is the food and grain that are exported. Quite a lot of that goes, as we said earlier on. Now, one thing I just wanted to mention about Mexico. Mexico is part of NAFTA, which means USA and Canada and Mexico have a trade agreement. But China has started to come into Mexico, and when they start making goods, those goods start to get into the North NAFTA. And USA, of course, is not very happy about it. And one of the things they did was to try and put some of the projects that China had proposed, cancel them, like $3.7 billion contract, the Chinese-led consortium to build a high-speed train. So what China did was to just shift that project to Argentina. Okay, so many opportunities for China there. Let's forget that. Uh, okay, this is a good question here. As China becomes increasingly more engaged with Latin America countries, where does that leave the USA? Well, here's what the answer is to that. It says, look, it says, this is the professor talking again. The United States always plays a very difficult role in the region. The United States has the opportunity to help Latin American countries, but did not. So the relationship that Latin America and China have is completely different than that of Latin America and the United States. So you see many countries that China is helping to develop infrastructure, is helping to build the agricultural sector and the economic and improving the technological development of the region. The United States didn't do it. And what I see, this is him talking at the professor, is that in the perspective of the relationship with the United States for many years was a win-lose situation. A good example is Mexico. 80% of the international trade of Mexico depends on the United States. So it's very important for the Mexico, for Brazil, and for Chile, Peru, and Colombia to diversify their market, to diversify their trade partners, especially. So diversify trade partners means that's an encouragement for them to go into China. Now, you know this guy. I mean, he was until recently, the vice president, and he's talking about the game plan that they have for the dangers that see of the debt that China is actually loading onto Latin America. And this is what he's saying. He says, don't accept the foreign debt that could compromise your sovereignty, protect your interests, preserve your independence. And that is a narrative that I personally do not agree with. It would be very wise to play. Okay, so what he's saying is basically don't go be friendly with China or take on any loans from them. Okay, I'll stop here and then we'll give a little bit of a chance to do the Q&A. Let me stop the share. Okay, we can go for the view. I'll unmute you now. Okay, I think you'll have to unmute yourself. I don't think I've got an option here. So just unmute yourself. And whoever has a question, let's see if you can untangle that in some
I've
way.
got one back, Rafik. What about the Central America?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Good.
What about Central America?
Central?
Central America. Yeah,
What is
like Central America.
Oh, Central America. Well, yeah. Panama is very much part of the BRI, and a lot of countries over there are really part of this as well. I didn't read those out, but they are in fact becoming very much part of the big plan of China to come in and make the investments. And Panama has already done in terms of accepting some big infrastructure project from China. And Dominican Republic and those are also very much into it. I had information further down in my slides, but as I was running out of time, I didn't go into all that. So they're
Yeah,
very much part of this thing as well.
yeah, because the Americans have kept a very the American human rights abuses in Central America is second to none. You know, like what they've done in Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras is is on is on dreadful. So do you think that like in Mexico, you see, like it was always Central America was always used as a farm, like basically for them, to get their stuff in and stuff like that. So would you say the Americans would interfere if
Well, they
China?
are already. The fact that Mexico had to cancel that high-speed project, the rail that China was going to bring in, it is because of American pressure, because America is going to exert a lot of pressure. Look at Venezuela. I mean, look, Venezuela has gone into a real sort of, bad situation because of the oil. And, it doesn't take much to get into a country and, throw the spanner in the works. And
Absolutely.
usually, the big corporate world is there. They can either sort of be beneficial to a country or can be, they're out to sort of take the resources and make big bucks out of you.
Because it is interesting, you see, like for instance, Nicaragua. I mean, I was there during the revolution there. Before the revolution, they had the lowest rate of literacy in not just Central America, but the whole of Latin America. And then within 3 years of the Sandinista revolution, the literacy level was the highest in the region,
Mm,
the
mm.
highest in the region. And then the Americans invaded the place with the Contras, and the story about the drugs and how the Contras, they were supplying the drugs to America, and in return they were getting weapons. They were supplying the cocaine. And now Nicaragua is one of the worst countries for literacy in the world, and
Yeah.
it's violent. So the
Well, I
Americans
mean,
have
you
been
can see from the
terrible
way that
treatment.
Cuba has been handled by the USA that it's like a lesson to all the countries that if you go out of step, you're not going to be in favor of USA. So they have suffered because of that, enormously.
But the thing
Y-
about Cuba, Shafiq, is that Cuba supplied the doctors, they supplied the teachers. Right? Cuba was a light for the whole of the region. Without Cuba, they would have, people in Nicaragua, El Salvador, they would have really suffered. So Cuba has actually done so much for the world, so much for the
Oh,
world that it's
yes, I have a
unbelievable.
high regard for them. I was doing a project in Zambia, in Africa, and I had to attend one of the receptions, and there I met the Cubans. They were very keen to come and talk to me to find out what the hell I was doing there. They wanted to very quickly pin me down to something that is not a threat or a threat to them. But I found them to be deeply committed and very sort of dedicated people.
Mm.
So, Cuba, I think, is still suffering because of having shown, glare or, looked into the eyes of USA, and USA didn't like that. Okay, anybody else?
I wonder what Spain thinks of it, because Spain was very close with Argentina and Peru and places like that. With
Yeah,
lots
I
of
think all these
immigration back and
countries,
forth.
I think all these countries have had a very colonial link to
Hmm.
these countries. And colonial links are something which are probably not based on the right footing for the colonies, because they haven't come out good. Uh, Maybe
Yeah.
there was some little benefit, but not a whole lot. The people who benefited really are the people who colonized them. So Spain, with all the gold, and in fact, I had gone to Spain to one of the Granada, I think, was it Granada or Cordoba?
Hmm.
And in that big sort of old mosque, which
Hmm.
has been converted into a church, they had four
Yeah.
tons of gold there on the wall.
Mm.
I mean, I took a picture of that gold,
Yes, so much gold.
sort of big thing there. And I said,
Mhm.
my God, that's a lot of gold. And that came from South America.
But
Um,
lots of Spanish people sort of um, work in South America, then they retire and come back and bring their wealth with them, even now, you know.
So that relationship now is passé, as it were. So what we
Mm.
have now is something that China is offering. That's why I find China's model to be quite workable,
Mm.
because it's now sort of making sure that you start from the providing benefits to the people, and not just to make big bucks by a big company, which is the old model, you and a trickle down economics, as it were, from that.
Mm. And did
Yeah.
you say that Argentina and Peru are going to join? They haven't joined yet. They're going to.
Brazil and Argentina both are at the moment, they are part of what they call this Mercosur. That's a trade pact
Mhm.
which was set
Mhm.
up some years ago, and very much part of the USA as well. I think USA is part of that as well. But I showed you the trade with Brazil. Half of it
Mhm.
is going towards China, so they're already got one foot there. And
Mhm.
with the big rail project in Argentina taking place by China, they're
Mm.
also having one foot there. So I think it won't be long before they become part of it.
And Peru as well, because it's a
Yeah,
very poor country. Mm.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was just wondering,
Giselle.
Shafiq, when you were saying you don't, you don't know why there seems quite an anti-China feeling, that the media seems so against China. I think that in the West, it's fear on the part of the West, because China seems to be going into all of these countries, especially Africa and South America, the poorer countries, and loaning them money or expertise. And then when they can't pay it back, um, then they seem to take over. And to be honest, we all know that the people, the leaders in the African countries, South American, they're all so corrupt. They're all in debt and going broke. That I don't even. I get the impression that China doesn't try too hard to give them a chance to try to pay it back. 1, 2, 3, they've gone in and they've taken over. I know
Well,
probably more in Africa than South America. And the other reason I think that the West are probably against them is because of their human rights. What they're doing with the Uyghurs, with the people from Hong Kong. And these people do not want to be taken over. They're asking for our help. And, this is something which obviously we in the West, we don't like that sort of thing. They're an autocratic government.
yeah, but the media sort of plays up these things. Media plays it up to the point where it keeps us in the news on the front page, as it were, whereas the real big sort of developments that have helped the people are sort of put onto the side at all and not reported on at all. It's a political game that gets played. It's not helping the Uyghurs. You can take it from me. What is going to be helping the Uyghurs is what China is doing to try and retrain them and bring prosperity to Western China. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of, Central Asia is very poor, but resource rich. And that is because that they don't have had access in many ways to a lot of manufacturing coming their way, or having access to ports. That's one of the reasons why this Gwadar, when I talked about, the link in the deep sea port in Pakistan, that is connecting right up to Western China and then to Central Asia, is going to sort of bring in a lot of prosperity to that region. And if you have prosperity come in, then I think there's a lot of gain to be had. But of course, the players will always, um, the opposite, the opposition will always highlight, what a big suffering this is being under for the Uyghurs to change over to better their lives and so on. I wouldn't buy anything that I hear from the Western media and believe it to be 100% true. It may be true, but they're highlighted to the point where it gets twisted in their importance. Yeah, Meiling.
Hi, I think a lot of it is a fear of something inevitable. China is gaining so much strength, and America could see their share is getting smaller and smaller, which is inevitable. And so a lot of it is a fear of America taking second place, and therefore the emphasis on the negativity plays out much more than it would otherwise be. And you could see China is now what, 3/4 of American wealth, whereas a few years ago used to be a quarter of it. It's only 20, 30 years ago. Chinese wealth is a quarter American wealth. And now, especially with COVID, they was pretty soon overtaking it. So it's that fear, instead of America looking at how it could be prevented, i.e. through education, i.e. through high technology, i.e. through manufacturing, they look back and looking at the coal mine, looking into the heavy labor industry that they used to dominate. And that's how Trump gained his popularity among the working people, because he keep emphasizing make America great again, as if you could turn the clock back 50, 60 years ago, which it cannot be.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the things that you pointed out just now about the Trump, the attraction of the people who voted for him for Trump sort of policies, which were very inward looking. A joke comes to mind that somebody sort of sent to me. It says, we've got rid of Trump, which is the small problem. Now we have to reorganize the whole educational system and see why it is 70 million people voted for him.
Well, as you know, in America, a coal and manufacturing industry was their great engine, but that is no longer going to be the case. And so instead of re-educating people into the future world, they keep looking back and thinking, go and dig up more coal, go and dig up more oil. It's going to replace them back to what they were. But the world has moved on, has changed. And so people who lost out the job, which you don't blame them, because that's their lifeline, have gone or threatened to be gone. And so Trump used that to capture people's support.
Yeah, let's not also forget the role of the big corporations, because the big corporate world has gone after the bottom line, and every quarter they have to sort of present some figures. And to that extent, they have targeted profits as their basis, with profits but no vision, which means that when they found there was cheaper environments for their goods to be produced, and when these big pipes were connecting in the late 80s, you know, the internet access, then all that became accessible. So all the jobs got shifted to a large extent abroad for manufacturing, because these corporate world opened up factories in that part of the world. So that fault, if you like, lies on the corporate world not having the social, if you like, conscience to say, look, because of technology, lots of jobs are gone. 80%, in fact, of jobs losses is because of technology. They have gone, and we haven't retrained the people. And the government has been complicit in that, because they have very quietly gone and said, look, what we'll do is we'll go into financial services and make some quick bucks that way, without having to do the hard work of retaining the people. So the people who have come into power, or the governments, I find that to be, you know, exceedingly poor choice of governments. Except for my game changer, I must say, point out the game changer is Angela Merkel as well, along with Elon Musk and Imran Khan and Xi Jinping. So we have people with the vision and who can affect change and who can analyze the problem. If you analyze the problem correctly, then you can solve it. If you don't analyze the problem, then you won't be able to find a solution. And that's what we have been facing. Okay, Ruth. Ruth?
I'm talking. Sorry. Can't talk now. Hello, I just wanted to ask a question. One, how did the states manage to get Mexico against the rail?
To cancel the rail project, you mean?
Yes, and that's one. And the other thing is, I was thinking the rail system in the States is so bad that they would do well to get China in and
Very true.
yeah.
In fact, China has repeatedly told USA to become part of the BRI. In fact, it's saying, look, let your companies come and build, you know, and take part in this whole sort of project. But I think the Europe and USA, I think North America is keeping, they don't know what to do actually. They don't have a counter narrative and they're not able to develop one. So that is one thing. The way that I would say that any country exercises power or influence over the other in terms of the cancellations of projects is through so many sort of bodies that are there. You could be like, I'll give you an example of Pakistan. When the corrupt leaders were there, the money, a lot of money was laundered. And then the accusation came in that this laundered money somehow was funding the terrorism. And they got put into something called FATF, FATF, which is a body that oversees how much involved you are about into terrorism or supporting terrorist activities. And then if you're in the blacklist there, then what happens is that all the investment ceases. So that sort of pressure can be brought in, and it's very hard to get out of it. So there are very many mechanisms to apply pressure on weaker countries.
Shafiq,
Yeah.
The way that they control is that the only presidents who get elected into these countries are the ones who are appointed by the Americans indirectly, and and that has been shown to be the case for the ever since Nixon engineered the coup, before he was president in Guatemala. Remember, like in the 1950s. You look at the history. So all of the presidents of these countries are up the backside of America, right? So they take orders directly. Secondly, America being the biggest shipper of drugs, like the CIA, all these organizations, it's very important for them to have a clear run in, so like, the last thing that they need is other countries having an influence in that area, so I'm not joking about this, but the cocaine industry, the marijuana from Mexico and stuff like that is a huge earner for the American economy.
Yeah, you see, George, the support that a lot of dictators have had in the past, a lot of them in the Middle East, to ensure, oil supplies and all that, and to keep some of the fundamentalists, in control. And whatever the reasons are, you have your own people. That seems to be the way that you organize the world order. Not necessarily the things that were set up in the post-World War II as to what the new world order should be. So this world order is different. It's much more, if you like, a corporate controlled, government controlled type of thing as to who can in fact benefit the most. And that is changing now. I think the power, and in order to have that old regime or old model, you had bases all over the world so that the corporates were protected and your despots were protected. And you see that all over the Middle East, all over the world, 700-800 bases all over the world. Now that game is going to be sort of not working, because the game that is now changing too is who has the economic might now. And China is coming up very, very fast to provide an alternative sort of, model. And that economic well-being and power that they are exercising now more and more is changing the world order, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly, in fact, I'm seeing it's happening very, very quickly, because once you uplift the common man and give him education, then the countries can rise rapidly, you know? Yeah, Jim.
In terms of America getting out of this problem they've got into themselves, somebody was talking to me about the American system of elections is a real problem. Like every candidate for the representative has 25 lobbyists who, with their own vested interest. Unless you change that system, where it's all to do with money, you only get money. These lobbyists are going to win, and therefore there'll be no macro solution out of it, because every 2 years they have to get re-elected.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how much of that is causing the problem here.
Yeah, I think the campaign funding is a big problem. And until recently, and I don't know how long ago it was, but when the Supreme Court decided to give the corporate identity as that of an individual that can make the contribution to campaigns, then the whole sort of distortion came in. And now, because the Supreme Court is very much on the Republican side, it's going to take decades to try and bring about a change, unless you have Biden extending the number of Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court from the current 9 to maybe 12 or 13 or whatever, so that he can appoint some liberal judges, and so take away the nominations or the power that Trump has given the Supreme Court by nominating very, very hardline the 3 judges. So that campaign fund ruling, a lot of the more liberal thinking is not going to happen now for a while in America, because it has got 70 million people who are followers of Trump. And then you've got a lot of judges who have become, Republican sympathizers, and Supreme Court is on their side also, So I don't see America coming out of this mess for some time now. And in the meantime, China has got a free ride now to sort of affect the change that they want in this world, and they're doing it.
Rafik, I think it's very interesting what you're saying. I had this conversation about 2 hours ago with a friend of mine, and it seems to me that the world is run by various tribes every now and again. Like for instance, you had capitalism, right, which I regard as a tribe, thinking. Then which is the Americans. Then if you go back, you had Genghis Khan, and he imposed rule. You had the Ottoman Empire, you had the Russian Revolution, you have various things, and various tribes in the guise of nations imposed their ideas on the rest of the world. And I think that now what is happening is it's the time of the Chinese tribe. The Chinese tribe, it's their time now. And I think this is what a lot of people will find very difficult to understand. But in a way, it's quite so refreshing, because hopefully it'll also wash away the older religious ideas as well, which have kept people in bondage for many, many long time, a very long time. So I think that the tribal situation is changing now, and it's the Chinese tribe which is now going to be in the ascendancy.
Yeah, I think what is also an addition to that is the impact of technology on societies. Okay, Mei-Ling.
Sorry, I believe if a Democrat wish to increase number of judges in a Supreme Court, they can. Any party could increase it, but they are also afraid it's going to carry on topping up each other. If Biden so wish, he could top it up. If Republicans so wish, they could have topped it up, but it will become a topping up games. And this is why I believe people in America was afraid if Democrats should take Supreme Court, you know, there would be two houses agree on thing, and if they could top it up as many people as they wish to.
Yeah, I know it can. It's a game that can be played like that, but
yeah, I mean, there's no limit to a number of judges in Supreme Court. They could top up extra one whenever they wish to.
Yeah,
so that a Republican can do that also.
Yeah, with the thin majority they've got in the Senate, you know, it's going to be a hard climb for the Democrats to do anything of this type, because the Senate is the one who has to do the appointments, you know. So the Senate, you know, 50-50 each with the deciding vote of the vice president that will swing the vote. So it's going to be not possible, I don't think, to do anything as big a change in the Supreme Court as probably, you know, of changing it. Not likely. Yes, anybody else? Oh, good. It's all crystal clear.
Well, thank you for that. I had no idea they were expanding in Latin America, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome, because, you know, I mean, it's so important for us to be able to see, because it doesn't get reported so much, you see?
No, I had no idea.
And if you look at the two maps that I showed you, 20 years apart, everything was blue, and now everything practically is red. So
and you go back like 70 years, everything was pink.
That's right, yeah. We shouldn't forget that. Yeah, Mei-Ling.
Shafi, if you remember when H2 was having problem keeping within the budget, China offered it, say we could build it for you for the budget you set on, but Britain refused it.
Oh, the HS2, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that very well.
They said we could do it in your budget. And
not only they said they'll do it within the budget, they'll say we'll do it for half.
Yeah. And see, so don't sneer at America. Britain is doing just the same.
Oh yes, when we talk about America, it's practically just a synonym for the West, actually, in a way. Apart from a few exceptions, like Angela Merkel and people like that. Well, yeah. So shall we call it a day, and wish you a good sort of evening, and stay safe. I've had my shot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shadi. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.